The Newfie Air 60 is a compact wireless mechanical keyboard. I recently replaced it with a newer model, but since this one is still in great working shape, I thought it'd make for a fun project and gift for my pal Galen, who made the music I'm using for this episode on an OP-1. So first things first, let's take off all the keys. And then the switches. It's easier to clean the inside with them removed. And back in they go. I found these keycaps on WhatGeek. They're called Doys, D-O-Y-S, by Deadline Studio. No idea where that name came from. But their design seems pretty inspired by the design of the keys on the OP-1. So they're perfect for this project. I had to get a few sets to fill up the whole keyboard, plus extras to allow for mistakes and misprints. It's already looking pretty cool with the blank caps. So to design the legends, which is the name for what's printed on a keycap's face, I need to take some measurements. 18 millimeters on the outside, cool, and a 13 millimeter diameter for the raised circular face. So I'll use these dimensions in a vector editing program. I'm using Affinity Designer 2, but Illustrator or Inkscape or something similar would work just as well. So for starters, I want to get the actual keycap dimensions in here. I'll use these as guides for designing, printing, and transferring the designs to the keycaps. All the caps are the same height, but there are some varying widths. So I grab a cap, delete the circle, and replace it with a rounded rectangle, and scale everything to the sizes I measured for the other caps. Copy, paste, and adjust to make all the other variants. Fill out some more of the keyboard, and do the odd sizes on this side too. I'm recreating the layout of the Air 60 keyboard here as a kind of sanity check. I won't actually be printing anything on the spacebar, but just for completeness' sake, here it is. So at this point, I want to make a size reference and double check my measurements. And it's a good thing I did, because after remeasuring keys, I actually do have to make some adjustments. Glad I did that. I'll replace these keys with my corrected ones in a minute, but now I'm pulling in some reference. This is a photo of the OP-1 Field, the most recent version of the device. And this is where it really starts getting fun. I don't have whatever typeface the designers at Teenage Engineering used. They may have even created their own. So I'm reverse Teenage Engineering it here. This 8 holds the key for much of the typeface. 2 ovals stacked. You can see that the other numbers are mostly just variations on this. To get the 6, we add a line on the left and delete a couple arcs. Also, you can see that the ovals kind of define a bounding box that the characters all fit inside of. 5 is very similar, but with more straight lines and corners. 3 is easy, just delete a couple arcs. 2 is a little trickier. I add in this diagonal line and get rid of the bottom of the 3, but now there's this unwanted little kink in the line. I could try and straighten it, but that looks terrible. So instead I disconnect it and reconnect it at the midpoint of this arc for a nice, clean transition. 1 is a line, same height as the others, which I'll copy for the 4. I bring in the 8 to get a consistent width, and the horizontal should actually be below the midline to look right. 7 is almost as simple as 1, and 9 is rotated 6. 0 is just the top and bottom of the ovals connected, and I like to put a slash in there to disambiguate it from the letter O. Next is letters. I'm starting with E because it's kind of the visual equivalent of 8, but with sharp corners. A is quite simple, staying within the box formed by E. The horizontal needs to go below the midline to look right, so I reference the 4 and use the same position. U and O are just modified zeros, as is Q, and I'm using E again to get the dimensions for H, and the horizontal from the A to see how far down the M's point should go. D is a partly flattened O, Z is the top and bottom of E with a diagonal line, S is an 8 with 2 arcs removed, F is a bottomless E, T is a weird F, a vertical in H becomes the center of Y, the 9 rotated and tweaked is G. Not sure why I didn't just grab the 6 for this. I overcomplicate the G for a second. That's better. 9 becomes J. H becomes K. And then once again, I try to get fancy. No. I lower the horizontal in H to get L. M becomes N. Closed face 3 is B. Stretched Y is V. O with a bit missing is C. With F, we get the bounds for X. I is double-ended T. Half B is P. P with a tail is R. Upside down M is W. And in a moment of weakness, I play with breaking the W out of the box, but I end up reverting this later. So now that I have the letters, I can do the modifiers and other keys. This is mostly a matter of manually spacing the letters out, since this isn't actually a font. This is going to be an artisanal, hand-kerned keyboard. I'll use these text legends as alternates. What I really want are graphical representations of their functions. I start designing the graphical legends with backspace. It's pretty easy, a left-pointing arrow, which I can reuse for enter, plus a little hook to make it more carriage returny. And that should be curved, shouldn't it? That's easy enough with a little circle. For tab, I once again try to get too clever at first, trying to illustrate tabbing and back tabbing for some reason, and it's just too much, which I figure out later. Moving on, we can also reuse the arrows on the arrow keys, believe it or not, a classic place to put arrows. The Mac command clover is a somewhat complex symbol, but it's not too hard to make. I start by making this pound or hash sign, and then each corner gets a circle. Scale it down a touch, and there it is. I then use this as reference for the option key, which is quite simple. Next up is the function key, usually represented with FN, which I've stylized here. A few little tweaks to get everything looking consistent. Caps lock will also basically be an arrow. I just make it a double arrow to distinguish it. And shift is the same, but without the bottom line. There's also a tiny shift key on the right side. And this is delete, classic X symbol, though that might get confusing. Okay, and here's where I come to my senses and simplify the tab key. Now for special characters. These will follow the shapes and forms of the letters and numbers. Bar is just a 1, backslash is diagonal 1, / is topsy-turvy diagonal 1, question mark is just an open face exclamation point P. And to clarify this X symbol, I'm giving it an arrow. Delete deletes to the right. And to keep things consistent, backspace gets an X2. Here I get the numbers onto keys and make their corresponding symbols for when you hold shift. ½ is close parenthesis. Backwards ½ is open parenthesis. 7 horizontal is hyphen. Long 7 horizontal is underscore. Double 7 horizontal is equals. Double crossed 7 horizontal is plus. Double plus rotated is asterisk. Plus hat is caret. 7 and 8 squished together is %. S with 4 vertical is $. Reverted command is pound, hash, number sign, whatever you call it, with a little tweaking. The @ symbol is where it starts to get more difficult. I start by trying to use the letter shapes I've established. My first crack at it isn't great, but I'll come back to it. Another easy one. 1 with a gap is an exclamation point. And I'm copying that % to make the dreaded ampersand. You can see what I was going for here, but it's bad. I try again using an 8 as a base, and it's better, but still not great. I'll come back to that one too. Sometimes you just gotta move on and do something easy for a while. Just getting all the letters onto keys here. And the rest of the symbols. Left caret is less than, right caret is greater than, tiny line is period, slightly bigger diagonal line is comma, comma plus period equals semicolon, period plus period equals colon, therefore comma equals 0, comma also equals quote, and 2 comma equals double quote. Square brackets are parentheses with corners, and curly braces are 4 quarter circles. Nice. Okay, now for some fixes. First is an easy one. The asterisk is too busy right now, so I go from 8 points down to just 6. That's a lot better. Next, the @ symbol. I'm breaking from the usual character constraints and basing this on a set of circles. I just break the outer circle here. Much better. Now on old keyboards, you can find some cool symbols that are no longer widely used. If I take the new asterisk and slap a circle on it, scale it up a bit, it makes this kind of captain's wheel. That's the classic control key symbol. And then a 3/4 circle with an arrow pointing out like so is escape. And wait, why did I put this text in here with a symbol? That's not right. Now I'll just readjust these sizes so they look good next to each other. Tweak some positioning and sizing. Make the parentheses a little shallower. Okay, looking at this all laid out, I'm seeing a few more adjustments to make. The enter symbol should fill the key a bit more. Escape should be bigger. And yeah, the round letters look too rectangular. Like, what is this, Bank Gothic? Also straightening that W out. Basically, anything where the whole letter could be a pill shape, I'm making it a pill shape. And now that I've done that, the function key is looking pretty out of place. So here's a new, friendlier, rounder version. Here I just want backspace and delete to look a little more consistent. So I grab delete, flip it, and lengthen it, and there's the new backspace. Okay, the time has come. Back to the ampersand. The history of the ampersand goes back centuries, and it can be written in many different ways. It came into being as a ligature, a kind of shorthand combination of the letters E and T, et being Latin for and. That FN I made for the function key is also a ligature. So I'm getting away from the more common swooshy version of the character and going back to the classic et, which I think works much better with this geometric style of text. Okay, now everything gets a touch bolder, and it's time to start in on color. The OP-1, especially the original model, is quite colorful. So all the non-character keys are going to be white symbols on colorful backgrounds. I'll start with most of them black and go from there. I also decide at this point the number keys should be white on black. Oh, and they need a few more symbols for functions. Since this is a compact keyboard with no function key row, the number keys have to serve that purpose as well. Little suns, little windows, a magnifying glass, and this one was fun, a little microphone, a do not disturb moon, rewind, fast forward, and play pause. And then one of those chevrons becomes a speaker for volume controls. And shrink down the underscore, instead giving it these little ears to distinguish it. Here's an image of the original OP-1 with its brighter colors. I'll be using it as a reference and an inspiration for the color scheme. Starting with the reds for escape, backspace, and delete. Green for enter, gray for modifiers. Now, just like the number keys, the escape key has multiple functions. So on the text version of the key, I'm adding a backtick and a tilde, which I make from a cut down sideways S. Here, I'm setting up the alternate text versions of the keys and the Windows key. Okay, how am I going to get shift to fit on this tiny key? Delete is fine. That's a standard abbreviation. I'll just do these other keys while I think on it. Oh wait, there's literally a tiny shift key on the actual OP-1. Okay, cool. I can just mess around with these letters a bit to make them lowercase. Ooh, and here's another ligature opportunity with the FT. I also noticed they changed the 3 from the original OP-1 to the field, so I'll make both versions. And now to round out a few more letters that I missed. Ooh, I like the function key being blue. Okay, now to start formatting it for print. Basically, I pack as much as I can into a page as specified by the print shop I'm using. This is going to be printed onto dye sublimation paper, which I will then transfer onto the keycaps myself using heat. I'm keeping the keycap outlines to use as alignment references when transferring the legends onto the keycaps. But as you can see, I'm expanding the inner outlines because I don't want them to touch the caps and get transferred over. You'll also notice that I've mirrored the artwork because it will get reversed when I transfer it. This is very important. Do not forget this step. While we wait to get this stuff back from the printer, I want to thank this episode's sponsor, me. Specifically, my online store, which is now up at Paradiso.Works, where you can get this sick sci-fi themed t-shirt on heavyweight cotton with embroidered details, designed with my friend and brilliant artist, Kim C. There's only a few left, so grab them now. There's also the print version of my module for the Mothership sci-fi horror RPG, Warped Beyond Recognition, and the Brain Drain patch. By the way, members of my site, Paradiso.Zone, get discounts, so check that out too. Alright, back to it. And here's what I get back from the printer. I had them do several copies to build in room for experimentation and mistakes, since I've never done dye sublimation before. To do dye sub, you apply this special kind of paper to plastic and heat it up. The dye in the paper gets absorbed by the plastic, producing a crisp, durable result. I learned all this about DIY dye sublimation from some tutorials people have made on YouTube and Reddit, so thanks to those folks for lighting the way. This is some silicone sheet I got on the internet somewhere, AliExpress I think. It's about 1 millimeter thick. Silicone holds up really well in extreme temperatures and will help hold the keycaps and transfer paper in place. To do the transfers, I use silicone, Kapton tape, and a flat iron. I should probably mention at this point that I'm using everything in this video improperly, against manufacturer guidelines, and if you are foolish enough to follow along, you do so at your own peril. Okay, so here's how to misuse all this stuff. I attach the silicone pieces I cut to the heating elements of the iron using Kapton tape. Kapton tape is a special kind of tape that holds up under extreme temperatures. It's used a lot in electronics manufacturing. I do this on both sides so I can hold the keycaps in place by clamping them down with the jaws of the iron. This winds up being a bad idea, but more on that later. So I use the rectangle and circle outlines as a reference to position the sheet on each key for the heat transfer. This is worth doing carefully. Misalignments tend to be pretty obvious. You'll see. So I hold this here on high heat for around 90 seconds and excitedly await the results. Ooh, that transfer looks great, but the underside is completely melted and the keycap is very deformed. Still, the actual transfer is very crisp and clean. So I turn down the heat a bit and add some more layers of silicone to the side that will be on the bottom to prevent it from melting. Much more insulation now. And let's see how this guy turned out. Well, the bottom looks good. But the legend only fully transferred on one side. This is probably because the more padding I put on the jaws of the iron, the less parallel they'll be when closed. So one side of the key winds up being closer to the heat. So I cut some smaller strips of silicone and use them to shim up the back end of the stack, so the keycap will be more parallel to the other jaw. That looks better. And the reveal. Hey, that's a nice print. And another one. I make a few more, including this longer key, which I do in segments. Turn it off when you're done. Unplug it too. So a lot of these turned out pretty decent, with good quality transfers. One problem you're probably noticing with this design is that even a very slight misalignment is very obvious, because on the legends with backgrounds, it's very easy to tell there's more margin on one side than the other. Also, when I experiment with higher heats or longer durations, I wind up with paper stuck to the keycap, which I have to scrape off. So while I'm doing that, I'll just say, if you're enjoying this video, give it a like and subscribe if you want to see more. You can also become a member of the channel by hitting the join button, or you can join my website, Paradiso.Zone. By doing so, you get access to a whole bunch of members-only stuff, and you join the ranks of these fine folks who help make this channel and videos like this possible. to the build. You'll see that the surface here gets a bit messed up. The keys have a slightly textured frosted surface, which gets partially melted by the process. More problems come up with larger keys. It'll become very apparent if I didn't get the background shape exactly right. Plus, my current setup doesn't seem to heat them evenly. And when I try to do multiple passes to get more even heating, I melt holes in the face of the keycap. Not great. So some of these issues are definitely coming from how I'm doing the heat transfers, but some are in the actual designs. So it's time to revisit them. First, I just expand all of the backgrounds. Instead of having a margin between the background and the edge of each key, I'm making them all full bleed. So they go up past the edge. This ensures that the full face of the key will be covered by the color, which means if I get the shape measurements slightly wrong, it won't matter. It also gives me more room for error when I'm transferring the designs. It's a little harder for us to tell if something is centered when the visual reference points are further away from each other. One of the reference points for each keycap is the edge of the face. Nothing I can do about that. But by expanding the backgrounds, I'm changing the other reference point from the edge of the background to the characters in the middle. This makes it just a tiny bit harder to tell if the legend is off-center once it's printed. Given my very hacky way of doing the transfers, I'll take whatever advantages I can get. This is also an opportunity to make some more design tweaks. Like I make this alternate Quake style cue, which I think looks pretty nice and is more readable. I'm also playing around with slight color variations to see how they come out in print. Then I just fill up each page with copies of keys, so I have extra backups for when I mess up. Plus a few bonus keys. Don't worry, I flip the Paradiso key later. So that's off to print. The other problems are in how I'm actually doing the transfers. The finished keys are winding up with weird half-melted textures, and the transfers are often uneven, especially with larger keys. The edges tend to get transferred more than the middle. The second problem is at least in part because the keycaps are slightly dished, so that the middle of each key is slightly lower than the edges. To solve both of these problems, I'm going to sand down the keycaps so they're nice and flat. Flat enough anyway. I start by bluing the caps with a Sharpie. This is a thing machinists do when they want to grind something flat. By putting a pigment on the surface, it's much easier to tell which parts are still prominent after sanding. I feel like a lot of people don't know this, so here's a tip. Sharpies are actually alcohol soluble, so if you do this and get a stray mark on the wrong part of a keycap, you can just wipe it down with some rubbing alcohol and it'll come right off. Now to flatten the caps. I'm wet sanding, which is like normal sanding, but wet. This prevents dust from kicking up. You don't need to become any more full of microplastics. I start with rougher 100 grit sandpaper. This takes material off quicker, but it leaves visible marks in the plastic, so I'll need to go over them again with a finer grit later. And here you can see the concavity of the keycap. The edges are getting worn down while the middle still hasn't been touched. Once the bluing is mostly or completely gone, I move on to 320 grit for a smoother finish. This doesn't take as long. And again with 800 grit, pretty quick. And finally finishing at 1200 grit. Doing all this for every single key on the keyboard kinda sucks, but it does produce better results. So eventually I figure out that there's a much simpler and better way to use the flat iron. I got rid of all the little silicone strips on both jaws and laid out a couple longer strips, each a little longer than the longest key I'd be making, on just one side. Then I leave the iron open and just press the key down on that side. This way I don't have to worry about the angle the jaws come together, and I can ensure that the keys lie flat. I land on about 90 seconds at the 21 setting on this iron to get a good print, but frankly I don't recommend using this flat iron. Get one with an actual temperature readout. As far as I can tell, the numbers on this one's dial are totally meaningless and arbitrary. Or you could maybe get a cheap laboratory hot plate. That'd probably work well too. At some point though, you're spending enough money that it gets silly and you'll just want to get an actual proper sublimation heat press. You know, an actual piece of equipment that's designed to do this. This whole process is pretty cumbersome and definitely does not scale well. This is definitely a cobbled together way of doing this, and I'm sure every manufacturer of every product involved would be like, please don't. But for me, it's a pretty cost-effective way of experimenting with new techniques and turning an idea I had eating at me into something tangible. So there's that. Ooh, that's nice. Doing it this way means I can also do several smaller keys at a time, and these turn out pretty good. So in the end, I was pretty happy with how things came out. It's definitely a handmade DIY project without the polish of a real manufactured teenage engineering device, but I think that for what it is, the final result came out pretty cool. It's a nice travel keyboard with a distinctive look and a bunch of alternate keycaps to suit your preferences. I got to learn a new process for making things, and I got to learn about and deconstruct some of my favorite graphic and industrial design. And I got to make a little gift for a friend. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and consider becoming a member here on YouTube or at paradiso.zone for a whole bunch of nice benefits. Here's a little box for those extra keys. And with that, we're done. This goes off to Galen. Thanks for watching.